to Cindy F. as our speaker this evening.
Shake out the jitters. Hi, everybody. I am an alcoholic, and my name is Cindy. And I want to welcome all the newcomers and those who are willing to come in here and take a chance, not only on themselves, but on the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Amazing things will happen to you if you just hang on for the ride of your life. I know that I myself am absolute proof of that, and it is indeed an honor for me to stand before you and to share my experience, strength, and hope. My sponsor had an accident shortly before tonight's meeting, and I always tell her that she has to come when I speak to make sure that I tell the truth. So I might tell somebody else's story. No, I won't really. My story is plenty enough, and I always have a lot of fun telling my story. I deliver my story pretty much old school. I go back to what it was like, what happened, and what it was like now. And even though I'm nervous, you'll find as time goes on, I get real chatty, and God just delivers the words through me, and that's all there is to that. My story starts out kind of as a fairy tale. I've been that little girl that always kind of lived in the fairy tale world. A lot of times I still do, even as an adult. I like it there. I was born with a horrible case of hives. That was my first allergy. Unbeknownst to me, until much later when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't really know what allergies were going to have in store for me. I've always been really, really small. I was teased all the time as a young child. I was abnormally small. My parents were always taking me to doctors trying to figure out what was wrong with me. So I was always trying to figure out what was wrong with me too, and was thoroughly convinced, really most all of my childhood, that there was something very fundamentally wrong with me. I tried to fit in. I was that chameleon girl. I would make myself into whatever I thought or perceived you wanted me to be, and that's what I did, again, well until to my adulthood. And of course, that obviously just didn't work. So my childhood was relatively smooth and easy. I have learned in Alcoholics Anonymous, I can't blame anybody for any part of any of the decisions that I have made myself. And that's a piece of Alcoholics Anonymous that I'm very, very fond of, because it was always everybody else's fault. My older sister, my brother, my mother, my father, somebody other than me. In fact, I didn't learn until I came into Alcoholics Anonymous that I, and I alone, am responsible for my life. And it was like, wow. My sobriety date, by the way, is October 1st, 2008. I have been very, very lucky. I came to Prescott drunk. I took an exit off of the freeway and decided I would move here. Went back to Kansas, where I was living a ridiculous life, which I'll get into just briefly. My sponsor always says, just stick to, just the bare minimum. Some stuff is for my sponsor only. And so I will hit those high points. So anyway, went on through school, grew up there, graduated from high school, went on to school after high school, married my high school sweetheart. We had grown up together, trick-or-treated together, had a long, long history together, and I based all my dreams on all the rest of my life on this other person outside of myself, once again. So what happened, we'll fast forward a little bit through all of that. I was happy and he was not. And I didn't really understand that until I caught him in the backseat of a car with a very dear friend of mine. And my reality changed to some extent in that moment. I think I understood what changing in a twinkling of an eye actually came to mean for me, because it changed everything that I thought my life was going to look like. And at that point, I was not a drinker, wasn't a drinker in high school. I grew up in the 60s. Good girls didn't drink. I was the first girl in my senior class that got drunk. That was my first drunk. I blacked out. I fell out of the hayloft into the horse corral and didn't drink again for a number of years because I thought, you know, what's up with that? And by the time I got to school the next morning, word had already gotten around that I had gotten drunk the night before and people wouldn't talk to me. And I said, well, I'm just not doing that again. It really wasn't even any fun. And so that was that. Still never liked the taste of Canadian Club either after that. We stole a bottle of it from my parents' bar and mixed it with squirt and ended up with 3/4 of the bottle left, and I drank it straight, which was the beginning of some pretty serious patterns of how I do just about everything in life. I don't really know that middle of the road. I swing to the extremes one way or the other. AA has taught me how to get back into the center of things, as have the Native American ceremonies, which are a huge part of my spiritual life today. I'm lucky enough, I know a group of people here and in Cottonwood that I get to sweat with. I've attended a lot of sun dances. I've been on the Rosebud Reservation a lot, and that's very near and dear to me and to my heart, and has really enhanced the spiritual journey that AA is really all about for me. But anyway, so we'll go through all of that stuff. Anyway, so I ended up, worked out that marriage, I thought, for a while and stayed with him, had a child with him, and his indiscretions continued to go on. And so I decided that I needed to do something other than what I was doing. I grew up in a very small town in very rural northwest Kansas. And the only people who would really have anything to do with me once I was divorced were people who drank and had lots and lots of party favors. So in my 20s, by then I'm in my 20s, I got introduced to a lot of things that I really, really liked. And I tried everything that was given to me, every party I could go to. I did move away, by the way, because it wasn't going to be acceptable for me to live in that little town and carry on the way I wanted to, so I made a geographical change in my 20s. Then I think looking back on it was when, for sure behaviorally and really drinking and drug-wise, it was the fast and furious for me. I taught a lot of my friends how to do drugs. I drug them to the bars with me all the time. I was a party girl, a bar girl. I liked to dance, and so I was out partying all the time. That poor son of mine, I always made sure he had a babysitter, sometimes a babysitter for the weekend, because I would just drop out of sight for a weekend. And I carried on that lifestyle for a good 15 years in Colorado by then. I think the Wheel Bar in Estes Park, Colorado still has a bar stool with my name carved under the bar because I was always there and everybody knew me. And so far, I hadn't progressed to the point where I was making such a complete ass out of myself, although I was a blackout drinker by then, and I drank through that. If I got sick, I told myself that it was just going to make more room for more drinking, more carrying on, and that's what I did. It didn't slow me down a bit at all. And those of you that are here tonight that know me personally, I'm still a pretty high energy person. So I could outdrink almost everybody that I ever ran into at any bar, and that actually was a real sick goal of mine for a number of decades, to outdrink everybody. I would walk in a bar and they would have a pitcher of kamikazes waiting for me, and off I would go. And someone usually always saw to it that I got home safely, wrecked a car or two here and there, but managed to limp it home, and didn't have any consequences to all the things that I was doing other than progressing down a horrible, debilitating road that I was totally unaware of. In Estes Park, Colorado also, I met my next husband, who was a party guy. I either married or lived with the party guy or the drug dealer, and that just always made perfect sense to me. So that was a pattern that I continued for a long, long time. No matter how abusive it was, I just drank more. That's how I coped with everything. really wasn't until early in my recovery that I realized that I had absolutely no coping skills to cope with anything in life. I used something always outside of myself to just be able to deal with no matter what it was. I started to have a lot of personal tragedy in my family. I had a sister who was killed at the age of 20. I had a niece that committed suicide at the age of 20. All my grandparents were dying off. My brother died of cancer. My nephew was hit by a drunk driver, and although I drank through every single one of those episodes. And that's just how I dealt with everything. By then, I'm deciding that I need to make another geographical. That always works for me. I'm a runner by nature. If I don't like how things are going, I will avoid it, and I will run. And I caught myself just the other day having those thoughts of doing the exact same thing. So, you know, there's always a lot of work for me to do in the program, and I love that about AA. It's been the most wonderful thing that ever happened to me, and I know that it saved my life and countless other people that I know personally. So I made that geographical change to California. I was tired of the cold, and by then I have a second child. I've divorced that second husband, taken the kids, and gone on to California. And as my Creator would have it, who seems to always keep me out of the worst jams imaginable, I was a driving drunk driver for I don't know how many years, and nothing unfortunate really happened to me, but that is, as I've come to learn, those are some of the yets that certainly will happen if I ever decide to make a bad decision, and God help me, I certainly don't want to ever make that bad decision, and those yets will come true, and I know that. So it happened when I got to California. I got very, very lucky. I'm a hairdresser by trade, and the salon that I was working in, a young woman started talking to me about prayer and meditation, and really wasn't drinking, and didn't know anybody yet who was selling drugs, so I really wasn't doing much of that yet. Anyway, and she got me involved in these meditation classes. So for the next 6 years in California, I didn't do any substances, no mind-altering anything. Only because, not because I thought I was an alcoholic, because I just didn't think that way. I didn't think my drinking really was a problem, except when I drank, but what does that mean? And, you know, I just couldn't process anything. I didn't know anything about Alcoholics Anonymous, didn't have any family member in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I went on my merry way, and when that meditation class ended, for no good reason that I can identify, I find myself in the drive-thru of a liquor store buying a bunch of beer. And whenever I went to the liquor store, to the very end of my drinking, I would get cases of beer, because I was a beer drinker, and vodka, and sometimes gin, and whatever else would fit in my trunk, and I drank it all. I didn't have people over, I didn't share it. I usually didn't share my drugs either, because I wanted that all for myself, because you would like me if I was real upbeat and happy, and in order to do that, I had to be wasted, or at least that's what I told myself. So when that all ended in California, both of my parents had gotten sick at the same time, and they asked me to come back and help take care of my mother for just about 6 weeks. And by then I was on husband number 3, and he was a party pal as well. So I go back to Kansas, and right across the street is a drug dealer, and I went, well, I'm supposed to be here because of that. So I end up buying a house and staying in Kansas for I don't know how many years, until I about ran out. I divorced that husband in Kansas. Both of my parents got well, and I was still stuck there in my old hometown, recreating that reputation as the first girl in the senior class that got drunk way back then. So I isolated. I found another drug dealer to live with and lived with him on Main Street in an apartment and was as loud and obnoxious to my poor family as anyone could possibly be. And finally, my family asked me to leave town, and I was incensed that they would think I couldn't do that. I couldn't stay there and coexist with them. As it ended up, it was a very physically abusive relationship, but I stayed anyway because I was getting the substances that I wanted. Still not knowing anything about Alcoholics Anonymous, still really not having any consequences of any kind. By then, my mother had been diagnosed with cirrhosis of the liver due to chronic alcoholism. I didn't drink like her. I didn't drink scotch. I didn't like it. I could not possibly be an alcoholic. And I believed that to the core of my being for a long, long time. By then, clearly, you can imagine, I'm drinking and living a life totally out of control. I started my own cleaning business because I could show up and I could clean drunk. I didn't want to work for anybody. I didn't want anybody to tell me what to do, and I was managing just fine. Well, the boyfriend ends up going to jail, and I have just a very brief nanosecond of some clarity there, and I decide I need to move out from that situation. But I don't know where I'm going to go. I really don't want to live in Goodland, Kansas anymore, and I had managed to pass a drug screen and get a job working for the post office in my area. That was a good job. I shared this story a long time ago with Greg, and I've never really told that story at the podium. And when I think about how insidious this story is, I decided that I wanted to share it with you tonight. I moved to this tiny other little town, population 50 people in Levant, Kansas, which is hooked onto a post office. Now, I'm working in a post office in another time zone, so I'm doing split shifts. I can't keep track of when I need to be there, when I can't. And I'm having a lot of chemicals sent through the mail, which never dawns on me that that's really a federal offense. And I'm working for the post office. I'm showing up under the influence. I never get challenged that I'm showing up for work under the influence. Then I get a phone call because I'm awaiting this package. It's Mother's Day, and I really want to get loaded. And I get this call from the main postal center in Topeka, Kansas, to verify that I'm the receiver of this express mail that is on its way to me. And I'm, well, sure, that's me. I'm thinking, oh boy, here it comes. I have all kinds of stuff set up in my apartment, which is, again, right next to another post office. And all of a sudden, the postmaster calls me, and she said, this is on a Saturday morning. She said, we have your package for you. Well, I go skipping over next door. On top of the world, I can't wait to get this package. I walk in the door, and there's two DEA agents standing there looking at me. It still does not dawn on me that that could be connected to something that's coming in the mail for me, because I'm probably a little 3 sheets to the wind also under that. So I go on in there, and I said, I'm here to get my package. And they come out from behind the counter, and they said, excuse me, will you step outside with us? Oh, sure. They have the package in their hand. They won't give it to me. Still hasn't quite all clicked with me that I might be in some serious trouble. So we step outside, and they said, well, we have reason to believe that there's an illegal substance in this package. And I said, well, I can tell you right now there is. And then all of a sudden, the lights come on, the handcuffs come out, and I find myself in a car with these two DEA agents headed to jail. And all I can think of is how irritated I am that the next day is Mother's Day, and it's like, well, how's this going to go? I'm not going to get to do what I want to do. So, to make a long story a little bit shorter, they took me into their office, and they were going to throw me in jail, and they said, kept telling me, you know, it's a federal offense, and it's like, okay. That didn't scare me, it didn't deter me or anything. And So what happened, they wanted to know who sent me those substances. And it was my youngest son. And I rolled over on him to save my own ass in that moment. Now here's someone who bore the brunt of the very worst of my alcoholism and my addictions, whom I can never change that past with him, but my living amends to him will never be finished. And so we're on the phone, the three of us. We get a hold of my son. Here's his phone number. You know, I'm just really eager. I still think I'm going to go home and get high. I don't know what I'm thinking. And we're on this three-way conversation. And he admits to it, so nothing's going to happen to him. And actually, nothing's going to happen to me. And I'm going, well, I didn't really do anything so bad then. And the dogs couldn't find anything. They didn't find any of the stuff that I had cleverly, obviously, stashed away. And I thought, well, I still haven't done anything wrong. Haven't done anything out of the ordinary at all. So I have some pretty serious charges that come up with that. That's really the first time. I have to go on probation. I have to do UAs. And so I decided I would clean up my act just long enough to get through all that, because it's like, I'm leaving Kansas. I'm going to go somewhere else. I don't know really where I'm going to go at that point. By then, my drinking was an everyday. I decided that since everybody kept telling me you can never get fired from the post office, it's like, well, I want to see if I can. So that was my next goal in life, was to see what it took to get fired from the Postal Service. And it took me 2 years. And I got fired from the post office for insubordination, not showing up for shifts, doing everything imaginable. Then I started showing up under the influence because I thought, what does it matter? I don't care what's in that little folder they carry around. So no harm, no foul. So off I go, and I'm on a trip from Kansas to see one of my boys in California. And I literally take the exit to Prescott, Arizona off the 10 interstate. Never been to Prescott before, drunk, driving all my little guideposts where I can drive this far till there's a liquor store, then I could go there and go there. So that's pretty much how I ended up in Prescott, Arizona. And I decided I liked it here. It was 4th of July weekend. There was a lot of activity. People seemed pretty happy. I thought, well, I can do this. So I went back to Kansas, packed up what my car would hold, and moved here. And stayed pretty much in a drunken blackout until I had to go in for a job interview, get a job. I have to get a job. You always got to get a job. You got to take care of yourself, pay your bills, and I'm responsible, you know. So that much, you know, I could handle till I couldn't. Got the job and was drinking by then round the clock every day. Okay, you go on back, honey. It's okay. He is too. I get that. And so I had decided after a couple years of doing healthcare here, I had a job that took me out of the office. I could drink in the morning for breakfast. I could go home at lunch and drink again. And then I went home as soon as I could after work and proceeded to drink until I literally just passed out, day after day after day for almost 2 years. By then, I was an isolating drinker. I had alienated everybody. My family wouldn't invite me to any functions. And I decided I had enough money saved. I was going to stay home and drink myself to death. So I made that conscious decision that's exactly what I was going to do. My mom was dying from alcoholism. It must be acceptable in my life. That's what I'm going to do. So I armed myself. I quit that job. I armed myself with as much as I could fit in my trunk of booze. By then, I didn't know anybody that would sell any other substances to me. And I proceeded to try and drink myself to death. I was seriously depressed. I couldn't get out of bed except to make a drink. And that's exactly what I did. Or I can't tell you how many months on end. And I didn't die. I couldn't die. And I was so angry with God that the last morning that I drank, I remember being on my back deck screaming, and I'm in a residential area in Williamson Valley, and I found a box of explosives. I'm throwing M80s. I'm a crazy woman in a residential area, and nobody called the cops for whatever reason, thank God. But anyway, I'm proceeding to have some sort of a mental breakdown, and I don't know what to do except drink. So some of the women that I knew in healthcare, I had their personal numbers to. I start calling them and pleading. I said, I need a bed. I don't know what's going wrong, but I can feel parts of myself flying out of me, and I can't grab onto anything. I need help. They were all telling me I needed to call intergroup, and I was too drunk to get through all the digits to the intergroup number, until all of a sudden I'm hearing my phone kind of vibrate on my dining room table, and I hear this voice. And I pick up the phone, and for those of you that have been to intergroup, it was Sue. And she had the sweetest, calming voice. I don't know what she had. I was coming off a 2-week bender of doing nothing but drinking, but she said, try to hang on. I'm going to have somebody out to help you as soon as I can. And she did. Now, only one woman came, and I know that normally 2 go along for a lot of reasons that are all good. And I didn't remember by then making the phone call, so I wouldn't let this poor woman in the door. The music was, as loud as it could possibly be. I'm screaming, somebody's knocking on the door, and I'm not answering the door. About the time, and throughout this whole day, for the next series of days, there's some God intervention. I did things that normally I would never, ever do, and I answered that door. And this brave woman decided to tell me a little bit about her story, talk about Alcoholics Anonymous. I was just, I'm drunk. She convinces me, and I go along with her to my very first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. She takes me with the same clothes I've had on for probably 2 weeks. I look in the mirror, think maybe I should brush my hair. It's like, nah. And out the door we go to this women's meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous in Prescott, Arizona, the Wednesday Step Stories. I couldn't tell you anything about that meeting. That was my first meeting. What I can tell you happened at that meeting is something happened within me. I have no explanation for that other than my spiritual experience and profound spiritual experience happened that day. There were women who gathered around me after that meeting was over and told me that they understood. That I remembered when I got home. They told me that they would love me until I could love myself. I also remembered that when I got home. So the lady that took me back home, had a big book, had her number in there, said, now I want you to start reading this big book and call me. And it sat for I don't know how long, quite a while. And later on that afternoon, for whatever reason, I didn't make another drink. Again, that has to be the spiritual component of my story. And I remember looking out my kitchen window out on my back deck thinking, why would those women say that to me? I didn't have anything to offer. I wasn't dead yet. I wanted to die. But there was something fundamentally loving about how they treated me in that meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous that made a difference. That's why we reach out to the newcomer, to let you know that there's hope. There is always, always hope. I was 58 years old when I got sober. So trust me, those of you who are considerably younger than me, you have a really good chance to do this deal and to live a life beyond your wildest dreams, because my life is definitely beyond my wildest dreams forever. So about 20 minutes later or whatever, I had lost all concepts of time. My detox starts at home. I'm home. I don't live with anybody. I have a dog. And I start the most horrific detox I can possibly imagine. I didn't even know what was happening at the time. It took a couple of days, but it took me at least 3.5 days before I could crawl out of my bathroom. And I don't think I've ever been that sick. Things were coming out of the walls. There were bugs. There were snakes. It was dark. I couldn't get my head out of the toilet. But when I did, I looked over and I saw that little doggie that I still have today in my house. She never left my side. And for her, I'm eternally grateful. And I got sober. That was how it started. I didn't go to treatment. I didn't go to rehab. I took about 10 heavy days of being sick. No water, no food, just everything exploding inside my body. And I still remember clearly what that felt like. And I remember looking at myself at one point when it was daylight in the mirror and thinking, and my skin was still all puffy and all swollen from the amount of alcohol I had consumed. Thinking for the first time in my life, you know, I don't think people who just drink a little bit probably have to go through this. I think maybe I should go back to Alcoholics Anonymous and see what they're talking about. I don't know. I don't understand. I couldn't comprehend a word in the big book for, I don't know, 9 months of sobriety probably. Whenever I would read it, I'd read it, go back again, and it's like, okay. So I went back to that women's meeting 2 weeks later, and no one recognized me when I introduced myself. So I began to see clearly that something happens in these rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I still didn't have a clue what it was, but I liked it. I liked what they had to say. I liked how loving they were, how understanding, how compassionate, how everything they were. I got phone numbers and met a group of women who are still in my life today who bullied me, basically. They pushed me around and they said, honey, you don't know how to live, so we're going to show you. We're not going to just make suggestions. We're going to tell you. You're going to get a coffee commitment. This is going to be your home group. This is what you're going to do. This lady's going to be your sponsor. And it was like, okay. I don't know from nothing. And I think at some level I must have surrendered the day that I got taken into that Step Stories meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, because I haven't found it necessary to have a drink or a drug since that day. And I have no explanation for that. I've attended a boatload of funerals. I understand clearly about the progressiveness of the disease. I've studied a lot about alcoholism. I took the next 1.5 years of my recovery and did nothing but study alcoholism. I needed desperately to understand the disease that was killing so many people, including me. And I did that. I got real involved real fast, and it saved my ass. And it can save yours too. There are times when I don't really feel like going to a meeting, or I don't want to do something, or the service commitment is too much, and I have to find a way to push my way through it, or call somebody who will help me through it. My suggestion to you right off the bat was start to form your network. Get numbers of people, buddy up with people, talk your heart out, find somebody that you can share the beginning of this journey with that understands, because there's no one in this room that doesn't understand at some level the disease of addiction, and it will kill us. We need each other. We have to have each other. And the fellowship is one of the coolest things that you can possibly find in this program. Early on in my recovery, I was 4 months sober, and I decided the only thing missing in my life was a relationship, so I got on a dating site, and I found myself a guy that had a Harley that was also in the program. Now, I don't recommend doing that because it didn't turn out too well, because 6 years later, we lived together. We're still friends today, but I had absolutely no emotional sobriety. And when that question was posed to me, I didn't have any idea what that meant. And emotional sobriety is a big, big deal you need to learn about in this program. We don't know how to handle our feelings when they come up. We don't know how to attach those to situations because in the past we did something different that was not good for us. But there's a lot of information that will help guide you. There's Emotions Anonymous meetings. My sponsor and I do a lot of different 12-step things. I've done Native American steps. I'm very, very much in the middle of this thing because that's how I was taught. And I'm still sober, and I know that that's why I am still sober. In 2016, I was diagnosed with cancer, and I didn't drink. I didn't say the word cancer for quite some time because it was hard to wrap my brain around it, but I had a very dear friend who had just gone through cancer treatment, very similar to mine, and we met and we talked a lot about it, and I went through all the treatment and finished the treatment 3 days before my 8th AA birthday. and I didn't drink. I'm 6 years in remission. I feel better than I've ever felt that I can remember, I'll put it that way. And I have the most amazing life. I just want to share a quick little thing because my time's kind of getting to a close here. But last October, I took a trip down to San Felipe, Mexico with a very dear friend of mine. She's kind of my touchstone person. She got sober at 25 and she never has had a drink since, and she has 33 years in the program. And she's a hardcore gangster woman, and she teaches me a lot about what you can do in this program to have fun and to work through tragedies and how to do the deal. And she's always the one that says you get in the middle and you stay there. You get picked off by the wolves and all the other things on the outside if you don't stay in the middle of this thing. And as time goes on, you'll find, because I'm sure that it's true, that it's simpler to do this program as more time goes on. It's hard to have that patience in the beginning and do what is expected of you, go to the meetings and get a sponsor and do the steps, because the steps, you know, will make you raw. I couldn't wait to do my first 4-step with my sponsor. I had 72 pages and it took me 8.5 hours. Shows you what kind of life I had been leading up to then. And she sat there with me the entire time. And it was like gutting of a fish is the only way I can describe how it felt when it was all over. It's like, wow, this program gives you a way to deal with absolutely anything, anything. It's a blueprint, and it still amazes me that 164 pages in a big blue book of Alcoholics Anonymous is my solution to everything that I will come up against in life, everything. And it's a miracle. I see the miracles all the time. That youngest son of mine is 7 years clean off of meth. That would not have happened if I hadn't gotten sober. Number one, I'd have been dead at the rate I was going. And so I'm real proud of him. He's flying in to see me and help me finish doing some stuff in my house on Tuesday, so I get to see him again. And I'm real grateful for that. I'm grateful for the friends that I have made in a program that has brought me such incredible joy and given me the gift, really, of life. I went last October down to San Felipe, Mexico with that friend of mine that I was telling you about. I ended up buying a house. And in 2 weeks, the movers are coming to my house, and I am going to become a full-time resident of San Felipe, Mexico. So before I was getting ready to speak tonight, I actually was crying on the way over here because this is my grounding here. I got sober in Prescott, Arizona. My friends are here. My sponsees are here. People that will always be dear to me are here. And I love you. And I will always love you. But I'm so excited about this part of the journey that I can't hardly stand it. I turned 13 in October, and I'm acting like a 13-year-old. It's like the sky opened up, and everything that I needed to do to make this move possible to another country. And I'm aware that it is another country, and I don't speak much Spanish, other than the dirty words that I used to know and how to order drinks, and that's not real useful for me right now down there. And it hasn't been an issue. It's been smooth sailing. I have all my documentation in order. The house is mine. I went down the entire month of January and stayed down there. And I'm doing some work on the house. And in a few weeks, I'll be moving down, and I'm going to retire. I never thought I could retire. It's like I'm just going to drop dead behind the hydraulic chair because my salon was in my house at that point, which was great. You know, I had it made. It wasn't real hard to go down the hall to go to work. But I wanted to experience retirement, and Mexico is going to allow me to do that. And I'm over the moon excited. It's sentimental. This will be one of the last times that I probably ever speak, for sure in Arizona, maybe in this country. And that's bringing up all kinds of stuff for me, but I tell myself that I'm human. If I didn't feel that, there would be something wrong that would really disturb me about that. But I'm in a really good place. I'm real happy that I got asked to share. The timing was perfect for me to kind of close out this, not just a chapter, this book of my life in Arizona, and move on to other things. If you're ever in San Felipe, just look me up. First time I was there, brought my car to a screeching halt in front of this little yellow building, had a big AA sign on the outside of it, and they have English-speaking meetings every day of the week, less than a mile down the road from me. That stuff just doesn't happen, and you can't make that stuff up. So I know that God is with me every step of the way, showing me what I need to do next, and all I have to do is pay attention and walk through those doors. So please, there's something I want to share to close out with you that I found a few days ago. A lot of you may not remember who Philip Seymour Hoffman is. He was on Saturday Night Live. He was an actor. He always played the eccentric guy or the bully or that kind of guy. And I found this little thing that was written on behalf of him. Through his death, Philip Seymour Hoffman carries the message that addiction is fatal. Philip Seymour Hoffman had been clean and sober for 23 years until he died in 2014. Philip Seymour Hoffman came into recovery for alcohol and narcotics when he was 21 years old. He attended meetings for many, many years, clean and sober. Clean and sober and in full possession of his faculties, his work was inspired. The rest of his story is a common garden variety relapse. Philip stopped going to meetings, and by so doing, he disconnected himself from recovery. In early 2012, he began to abuse prescription medications, and once having relapsed after 23 years clean, he dove back into snorting and shooting heroin. The old recovery slogan is true. While we are sober, our disease is in the parking lot doing push-ups, getting stronger, and waiting for us to let down our guard so that it can attempt to kill us once again. We don't pick back up where we left off. We pick up as if we had never stopped. Philip Hoffman quickly became unable to function and became very reclusive, and eventually he went into detox, but he did not return to his recovery program. Philip Seymour Hoffman died from a fatal, progressive, and patient disease, and not a moral failing. My dear friends, we are given this gift of recovery. Never forget what it is that gets us clean and sober, which is a power greater than ourselves. The first time around, recovery is granted us through grace and mercy. And when we let go of that gift, we have to work hard to get it back. Hang on to it. So stay. Please, just stay.